Hello students. In our last video, we did some really exciting things. We built out our gameplay world and our player object. In this video, we're going to do some equally exciting things. We're going to introduce game states into our game. See, our game can operate in a variety of different modes. If you think about it, as soon as our game loads up, there might be a start menu, a start state. Then, when we hit enter or start, whatever we do to signify that we want to play the game, we should play the game. We should be in a play state. And eventually, we're probably going to lose the game, right? And there should be a game over screen. So we'll trigger a lose state. And our game needs to understand what state it is in and appropriately show the right graphics to the screen or allow the right gameplay operations. And so this whole lesson focuses on this idea of game states and modes of operation. So let's dive right into our lesson here. I've got lesson 2's starter file open right here, and I'm also going to go directly to my folder here on my desktop, and I'm going to open up the starter file in my browser so I can see it. And so it's really similar to where we left off in our last video with a couple of changes. So let's go and take a look. This lesson, lesson 2, is all about game states in something called overlay screens. An overlay is something that we draw over our game window. So something that sits on top of this. Now, let's look at our mission checklist. Mission number 1 says we need to add game state values. Let's hit Control F to bring up that search bar, and let's search mission number 1. We got one of 2 tags. Here's our first tag. Hitting the down arrow, we go to our second tag. Game state values. Add the game state values for start, play, and lose. Use clear names so the game can switch between these modes. So I'm defining a constant variable because once I define this variable here for our states, it's never going to change when I run the game. So what needs to go in here? Well, we got to have, 3 different states. So these are going to be properties of this variable. So my first property, I'll call it start. And then colon, and then I got to put a value. The value will just be a string that says start. So there's our first property. Our second property has got to be for the play state. So I'm going to do a play property, and its value will be a string called play. And then my third state is going to be for when we lose the game. So I'll do lose as a property, and I will do lose. Now, you don't have to use all capital letters here. I'm choosing to do that because it's signifying a specific constant state that the game is going to run in. So I kind of like that notation. And if we look, this is really similar to the structure that we had for our player. See, our player object had certain properties, the X property and the Y property. And our game mode variable, our game mode object here also has properties, start, play, and lose. So if we set the game mode to start, it will hold this value. If we set the game mode to play, it'll hold that value. Awesome. I think mission number 1 is done. We just defined some data. Remember, gameplay operations or video game design, 3 distinct steps: defining data, updating data, and drawing data. Right here, we have defined our data. Let's look at mission number 2. Mission number 2, if we come back up to our checklist, says set the current game mode to the title screen. All right, so we got to set the game mode now. So starting game mode, set the current game mode to the title screen. Make the game begin in the correct state. So it looks like we have a variable called current game mode. Note we're using let here because this is going to change its value throughout the scope of the game. Right? The current game mode might be the start mode. It might then change to play, and when we die, it will change to lose. So this needs to be able to update its value, which is why we're using let. And right now, it is set to null. Null is it's just something that has no value. So right now, this variable is set to nothing. Well, we want to change that. I want to actually set it to the correct state. So when I start the game, I want to be in like the start state. And the way I'm going to reference that is our object that we had just created, game mode, dot, we're going to access its start property. So what is the value of this property? Well, it's the string start. So now our game mode variable is going to hold that string. And we're going to use that to now trigger correct gameplay operations. So our program now knows that it is in the start mode. Mission number 2 completed. Let's look at mission number 3. We want to draw an overlay. All right, so the start overlay. Draw the start screen and show the title over the game board. So if we look here, we are inside of a draw function. So let's just look at where we are so we know. We got draw HUD, draw player, draw background. We're drawing everything. We're going to draw a start overlay. An overlay is something that sits over this window. So all of this stuff will appear sitting behind it. Now, how are we going to do that so that we can see behind what we draw? Well, if you look in this function, we say, hey, no stroke, meaning give me that invisible marker so that you're not going to see the outline of what we draw. And then I'm drawing, filling my paint bucket with a color, overlay BG color. We got to go look at where we define this color. Let's just take a quick look. If I scroll up, I'm defining my overlay background color not as a hexadecimal string. Instead, I'm defining it using RGBA. So that stands for red, green, blue, and alpha. These are going to be numbers. Each channel, red, green, and blue, are going to be using decimal numbers or traditional numbers from 0 to 255. Those correspond to our hexadecimal values of 0 to FF. Now, right now I have 0 in the red, 0 in the green, 0 in the blue. So that's going to be black. But then there's this nice number right here, and that is the alpha channel or the transparency. The transparency is going to go between 0 and 1. If it's set to 0, it means it is fully transparent. You see directly behind it. You can't see any of this color. And if it's set to 1, it is not transparent at all. You can't see anything behind it. Any decimal value in between is going to give a little bit of transparency. So right now I have it set to 0.66, which means you're going to be able to see behind it slightly. And so that's going to be super nice for an overlay that I draw on top of this. So anything that I draw, you're still going to be able to peek behind it and see what appears there. Typically, if I define colors that need an alpha channel or a transparency, I will always use an RGBA string. If I'm going to define a color that doesn't, I just use a regular old hex string. And that's just the convention that I like to use. So with that said, I'm going to go back down to mission number 3 and look at our start overlay. So we've got our overlay background color. We're drawing a rectangle here. That rectangle is going to be, let's see, it takes 4 pieces of information. The first are the upper left-hand corner of the rectangle. So x coordinate 0, y coordinate 0. So we're going to start by drawing our rectangle right here. Then you need to specify the width of the rectangle and the height. And width and height are the width and height of our canvas. So we're going to start here in the left corner. We're going to draw all the way to the width and all the way down. So we're going to make a rectangle that appears over our entire game window. And so now it tells us that we want to draw the start screen, show the title over the game board. So I want to actually create some text here that's going to show our overlay. So let's first make sure we do a little bit of work ahead of time. Let's put some new paint in our paint bucket, because right now the paint in our paint bucket is that overlay background color, that black color. I'm going to set the paint to be my text color that I have predefined. And then I'm going to align my text. See, I'm going to align my text, because this is going to be the title. In the X direction, I'm going to align it center. And in the Y direction, I'll align it center. And that's going to help me position my text nicely. I'm going to set the text size. You can see the text size down here for this text is set to be 18. This is what I like to call like flavor text. It's smaller. This text size, we're going to make it big because this is going to be my title. So I'll set it to be 60. And then I'm going to actually create some text. I'll say Crossfire, the name of my game. Where do I want to position it? Well, since I'm center aligning it, I want the center of the text. So center align in the X direction means we're going to be like positioning this S, okay? Because in the X direction, that's sort of like right in the center of our string. I'm going to center it dead center in my canvas. So width over 2, right? I take the entire width and I divide it by 2. That puts me right here in the middle. And then the height, what I've done here is I'm going to be stacking a bunch of text right on top of each other. So I'm going to use the height of my canvas, which puts me all the way down here. And then I'm going to multiply by a decimal. the smaller the decimal, the higher up I'm going to go. So you can look here, right? I'm multiplying the height by 0.44, then by 0.55, then 0.66. Those are going to be lines that are stacked right on top of each other. If I took that height and I multiplied it by 0.5, it's going to put me dead center in the middle. So I'm going to take, for my title text here of Crossfire, I'm going to take it and multiply it by 0.30. So basically it's going to put me about a third of a way down. All right, mission 3 is done. Before we test this, let's just look at mission 4, because I think mission 4 is really similar. If I look at mission 4, we are going to also have a lose overlay. So when we start the game, we're going to draw something to the screen. And when we lose the game, we're also going to draw something to the screen. So let's just fill out the lose overlay. The lose overlay, we do the exact same stuff. We call no stroke, give me an invisible pen. We fill our paint bucket with our overlay color that has that transparency, and we draw a big rectangle over the screen. And then look, our text color is sent, we're center aligning, and we're putting some text in here. But now it says we want to create some text to show the restart instructions on the lose overlay. So I'm going to just create 2 more pieces of text using the text function. And the string here, I'll say press enter to restart. And I'm going to place this at width divided by 2. And I'll do height times 0. Let's see, the last one was 0.44, so I'm going to multiply this by 0.55. And then I'll do another call to the text function, and I'll say press R to for title screen. And width over 2, we'll center it. And then the height, I'll shift it a little bit farther down, 0.66. Awesome. So let's see these overlays in action. Let's refresh the game. Let's refresh the game. Let's refresh the game. Refresh the game. It looks like nothing's happening. I'm not seeing the overlays, right? If I restart the game, I want to be able to see my overlays show up on the screen. Bummer. Well, let's see if we can fix this with mission number 5. Mission number 5 says, show the correct overlay for the current game state. Yeah, that makes sense. We got to make sure that we actually are calling those functions that we just were working in. See, we got this function called draw start overlay, where we're drawing our start screen, and draw lose overlay, where we're drawing our game over screen. But those functions don't just automatically run unless we call them. The only functions that are automatically going to run, whoa, I just zoomed up here, are these built-in P5 functions of setup and draw. These are the only things that run automatically. Everything else we got to call ourselves. So where are we going to call these functions? Well, let's go to mission 5. It says right here, we are inside of our draw scene function. We're drawing our background, we're drawing our player, we're drawing our HUD, and then we need to draw our overlays. So let's call one of our functions. I'm going to say draw start overlay. And then 2 parentheses means call that function. Let's run this. We should see our start menu. Whoa, great, that's awesome. If I press enter to begin, well, that's not working yet, but you can see our overlay. That's pretty good. Let's also draw our lose overlay. Draw lose overlay. And let's refresh the game. Whoa, there's our lose overlay. And you can see it's drawn on top of our start overlay, which was drawn on top of our game board. Not ideal, right? That's actually pretty bad, and it's really ugly. You can see the alpha, the transparency is working super nice though, but that's just very ugly because we don't always want to draw our start overlay, and we don't always want to draw our lose overlay. We only want to draw those overlays if the game state is set to the start mode or the lose mode. So what we need to do is we've got to use an if statement. We've got to ask some questions here. So we are going to put an if statement right here at the beginning of this. So set of parentheses. We are going to ask a question. And that question is going to be, is our variable current game mode, is it equal to, and we use 3 equal signs here for a strict equality, our game mode constant, that object's, if it's equal to its start property. If that is the case, then we will draw our start overlay. We'll then ask a follow-up question. Now, a follow-up question here can be given with else if, meaning if this question did not evaluate to true, ask this question. And that's how you can sort of chain these together. So you can give multiple sort of options for a single set of questions. We're going to check, is the value of that variable current game mode equal to our game mode constant, that object's lose property? And if that's the case, then we'll draw our lose overlay. Now we have the logic set up to display the correct overlay screen. If I refresh the game, Crossfire, the title menu here for our start screen, is set. And that hopefully makes sense, because if we go back up here, let's just see, we set our current game mode to game mode.start. Let's set it to lose. I'm going to just set it to lose really quick. Now we should only see our game over screen. Hey, look at that. There's our game over screen. And if I set it to play, we should see none of them, right? So let's set it to play. And now I don't see anything. Oh, this is wonderful. Let's set it back to start, because when we start the game, we want our game mode to be in the start mode. So mission number 5 is done. So now we got to go to mission 6. It says play mode update. Only update movement during play mode. Stop the game action while the overlays are showing. So what does this mean? Well, if I refresh the game, here's our start screen, right? And in our start screen, I can still move the player. I can start playing the game before the start menu is gone. That is not ideal. That's really bad practice. So what we have to do is we have to sort of disable updating the player, right? We don't want to update anything. We just want to show this menu screen. And so let's look at what's happening inside of our draw function. Remember, this draw function here is a default function given to us by P5, that library that we bring in, and it gets called every single frame of our game. Think of this as like our main update function, even though it's called draw. I know, it's confusing. But in here, we are asking a question. Look, we got an if statement here, and it says if true, update player. Then we're also going to draw scene. Now here we are using squiggly brackets. These brackets allow us to put multiple lines of code in here that we want to execute if this question evaluates the true. So right now there's only one line of code, but we're going to add more as this program builds out in scope. Here's the problem with this question. We want to check to see if that question evaluates to true or false. Well, true always will evaluate to true, which means no matter what, we are always going to update our player every single frame of the game, which is why I can update my player here when we are in the start state of our game. That's not ideal. I really only want to be able to update my player if we are in the play mode of our game. If the game is in the start mode, I shouldn't be able to update the player. If the game is in the lose mode, I shouldn't be able to update the player. So I got to ask a question here. If current game mode, strict equality, 3 equal signs, is equal to game mode, our constant object, and we're going to check that object's play property. So we're going to check to see, are they both equal to the string play? If that is the case, then we will update our player. If this question does not evaluate to true, we will not run this block of code, and just the draw scene function is going to run. So let's just check this. Draw scene is running. You can see the scene is running. I can see the player. I can see the HUD. I can see the overlay. And now, if you can't hear it, I'm clickety-clacking on the keyboard, and no movement is happening. So we have successfully limited player movement unless we are in the play state. So I want to hit enter to begin. I want to enter the play state. I want to play the game. And right now, I cannot do that, which means I got to find a new mission. Mission number 7. All right, mission number 7 says we have to have the start transition. Start the game when enter is pressed. That's exactly what I want to do. I want to press enter so badly. Switch from the title or lose screen into the play mode. All right, so this method or this mission is all about changing our game modes. Let's look at what's happening here. We are inside of a function called key pressed. And this function lives next to our draw function and our setup function, these P5 game loop functions that are going to be called sort of like automatically. Remember, this setup function gets called automatically at the start of the game. The draw function gets called automatically every frame. And key pressed is a nice sort of simplified, I'll call it like a wrapper function of a typical JavaScript function that checks whether or not a key on the keyboard has been pressed down by the user, right? So if I like type the key, I don't know, P, as soon as I press down on the P key, it will register it. It's not going to register if I'm holding it. It's just going to register that it has been pressed. And so this function will also be called every time a user presses a specific key. And if you remember, keys have key codes, so we can check to see what key has been pressed. Now, if we're asking a question right here, if the key code is enter, that's a pretty important key. So we're checking to see if it's enter, all capital letters. It doesn't have to just have a number. It can also have a variable value. And enter is a really important key. So if the user has pressed the enter key, what are we doing? Well, we're asking another question. So as long as they have pressed enter, now we'll ask another question. Is the current game mode equal to start? Or is the current game mode equal to lose? So are we in the start menu or the game over menu? If we are, if the answer is yes, we need to transition to the play state. See, we don't want to, if we hit enter, we don't want to transition to the play state if we're already in the play state, which is why we're asking this question. This concept of asking a question inside of another question is known as nesting your questions. This is a nested if statement. So if we've pressed enter, and if we are either in the start mode or the lose mode, what do we need to do? Well, we want to start the game. We want to play the game. So the first thing that we're going to do is we have a function called, if you remember, this function is called reset game to defaults. Maybe we played the game and our player's over here and they just died. We want to make sure that we reset them to their starting position. So I'm going to call that function reset game to defaults. I'll hit tab to auto-complete it, parentheses to call it, and a semicolon here to end that line. And now that we've reset the game to defaults, how do we tell the game, hey, it's time to play? Well, we use our variable current game mode, and we are going to assign it a new value. Now, 3 equal signs checks for strict equality. It checks to see if 2 things are equal. 1 equal sign assigns a value, and we are going to assign a new value to our variable current game mode, and we're going to use our game mode constant. We're going to access that object's play property. So now it is set to play. And when we hit enter, we're going to trigger it. It's going to get set to play. And if you remember current game mode, if it is equal to play, we should then be able to update our player. Let's check this out. We press enter, boom, and now I can move around the screen. Now, one of the things you'll notice here, if I scroll down a little bit in this key pressed function, we've got another mission right here. We're going to come back to that in a second. But I've got a debug here. We can force a lose screen because right now, there's no way for us to kind of lose the game. But if you look, if we press, we're asking a question here, if the user has pressed a specific key, we're not using key codes anymore. Inside of here, we can just check to see what key was pressed, lowercase g or capital G, and if the current game mode is equal to play, right? So if we've pressed the G key, we ask another question. If the current game mode is equal to play, mine is right now, I'm in the play state, then we change the current game mode to lose. And when I do that, our lose overlay shows up. Why does that happen? Well, all the way down here in our draw function, right, in our draw scene, we're checking, is the current game mode start? Show the start overlay. If the current game mode is lose, show the lose overlay. I just changed the game mode to lose, so the lose overlay shows. So now I should be able to press enter to restart. Perfect. And I can go back to playing. Game over. I can't move in my game over screen, but there's also press R for the title screen, right? Maybe you want to go back to the game title. Right now that is not working. So we got to just set this into place. And that is the scope of mission number 8. Our last mission here in this video. Return to the title screen with the press of the R key. All right, let's go down to mission number 8. It says, if we're asking a question, false. Well, I got bad news for you. This question is always going to be false. False is always false, right? This question always evaluates to no, which means these lines of code that are inside of my curly brackets here will never, ever execute. So what we have to do is we have to ask a question that could be true or false. And if it is true, then we are going to reset our game to defaults, because we want to restart the game. And then we're setting the current game mode to our start mode, which means our start screen should show again. So what question do we want to ask inside of these parentheses? Well, let's see. We want to reset if the game, if we press the R key. So I'm going to say if key, oh, I already got the if statement. I already got the question. Key is equal to lowercase r, or key is equal to capital R. In case they got like, cap locks on or something like that, then this should be okay. So anytime we hit the R key, it's going to hard restart our game. Just like if you hit like the reset button on your, your video game console, it should do that. All right, so that question looks great. Let's test this all out. I'm going to refresh my game, Crossfire. So right here, and I'm going to hit the enter key to begin playing. I can't move right now, so that's good. We've stopped that. Now I can move. I can play the game. Let's say it's game over. Game over works. I want to play again. I hit enter. I'm playing, and maybe, I want to restart my system, so I hit R, and we go right back to the title screen. Perfect. I can play enter. I'm going to use the debug to lose the game, for G for game over. And instead of hitting enter to play again, maybe I want to just go right back to the title screen. So I hit R. And there is our title screen. This is awesome. Our system that we have implemented to handle the various states of our game is working wonderfully. Right now, we've only got 3 states, right? We've got a start state, a play state, and a lose state. But I hope your brain is kind of thinking, what else could I do with this system? Maybe we could implement a pause state if you want to pause the game. Maybe we could implement a menu state if you want to show an overlay that has a menu of maybe like your options, or an inventory state. Maybe you're browsing your inventory and you want to see what gear you have in your inventory that you can equip to your player. The possibilities here with this system are endless. All we've got to do is come up with the idea and implement it. But the great thing is the system is in place. We're going to build on this system and do some more great things with Crossfire coming up soon in our next video. So I'll see you then.